Future 49ers on today's episode. We're scouting the mock drafts. Mel Kiper has a couple guys, Roger Rosengarten and Andru Philllips, a tackle and a corner going to the Niners. And his latest mock, J.C. Latham, big old offensive tackle. Are they a fit for your San Francisco 49ers? Coming up right now.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love all the everydayers, and we love everyone who's subscribed. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. It's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Croc. Roger Rosengarten was next up on our list anyway, and he just happened to pop up in the great Mel Kiper's mock draft for the 49ers. First round, pick 31, offensive tackle from Washington. He's the bookend right tackle where Troy Fautanu, who we've already talked about, was the left tackle at the University of Washington. And it was a good offensive line. It was a good football team. They're in the national championship. And if you watch the national championship game first, you probably don't like Roger Rosengarten very much, Croc. I don't know if that was one of the games you watched. It was the second game I put on, and I had to watch some more games just to make sure he wasn't as bad as he looked in that game. But I do have some thoughts on Roger Rosengarten for the 49ers. Andru Philllips out of Kentucky, a cornerback, went to the Niners in the second round of his mock, and we've been meaning to get to J.C. Latham. Where will he go in this draft? He's a really tough one to figure out. I think he'll be gone before the 49ers pick, but if he's near, or is he a player the Niners would even want to trade up for? So those are the three prospects we're looking at in today's podcast. When you popped on Roger Rosengarten, Croc, what did you see from the Washington right tackle?
The first game I watched was Washington against Michigan.
Yeah.
And not gonna lie, I didn't think it was bad. So
did you think he looked like a first round offensive tackle?
I thought he looked like a first round offensive tackle. The biggest question mark that I had from that, and it's in my notes, is I thought, and maybe this is something that makes somebody not a first round caliber tackle, but when they lined up essentially in kind of like a wide nine type, and you got him out in space, I didn't think his lateral movement from there was as ideal as I would like. So teams are like, all right, we're just gonna line a guy up wide in the nine, and then just say, hey, just go either get upfield and then cross his face and come back underneath. That's where you can get him, or maybe kind of mix him up and go around him and maybe run the hoop there, drop down real low, bend the corner, and get to the quarterback. You might be able to get him there. I just felt like in space versus wide nine, not as ideal. But I thought everything else, again, my first note here is looks like a tackle. And if you look at his teammate, maybe it's because he's wearing like number 55 or 53, whatever it is. Yeah. He looks a little bit more squattier, kind of just the way that he's built. He doesn't look as much, again, like your traditional tackle, how we're used to seeing him. Yeah. But Rosengarten, looked like a tackle. All right, so that was one thing that I really liked. Early on, can he handle quickness? Watch him get beat inside. And again, I think between that and then some of the reps I continued to see, whether it was in that game or another one, it was kind of the same thing, kind of really wide split. How does he handle the speed and quickness from there? But I thought he had a good quick step. I thought his anchor was good, not great. And for those of you, just anchor is just how well he deals with kind of speed to power, maybe a long arm stab, guys trying to drive him back into the quarterback's lap. Like, how does he deal with that? And I didn't think he was one of those guys that is just like a wall, and you see some of those guys where, once they're there, you're not pushing them back into the quarterback. You just see the strength, and guys have to try to run around them or something and try to figure out, man, how am I going to get to the quarterback on this guy? Maybe I got to really try to beat him with speed. But with him, it was like, man, I thought he handled certain things well, but you'd see him take a couple steps back when trying to anchor down. But then later versus Michigan, I watched him do something where I'm like, oh, that was good. versus wide 9, they tried to press outside, come back inside, and he was there, and he had a nice lateral step there, and it looked really good. So he showed that he could do that. And then in space, I thought he looked very fluid and natural, being able to move in space, where some of these other guys, and we'll get to JC Latham, all right, that might be something you question. So we'll get more in depth on Latham later, but Rosengarten, if you're telling me the 49ers took him at 31, not a guy I would be upset with.
I think some preconceived notions worked against me with Roger Rosengarten.
Oh, real quick. Also, dominated Boise State. I watched a couple other games, like dominated those guys. But when you watch the Michigan, and that's the crazy thing, if that's the worst of him, solid. I liked him.
Texas was kind of hit or miss as well for Rosengarten. So it, kind of depends on the tape you looked at. If you loved him, if you didn't like him as much. I had some problems with him as a first round prospect. Got to be honest, Croc, and I actually ended up giving him a 3rd round grade. And I mean, maybe the preconceived notion worked against me with Roger Rosengarten, because I was hoping to see poor man's Joe Staley, because he showed up at the combine and he's 6'5" and 3/8, 308 pounds, and he ran a 4.92, one of the best times at the combine. And
that showed up on film for me then, because that was one of the things. Again, I don't know his numbers, but I just thought he looked like a very natural mover in space. And some of these other guys, a little bit more lumbering, a little bit more like, let me try to get there. Sometimes you have to reach block and get to a guy. I thought he did that well. So he was a guy that identified that, moved well. And if you say poor man's Joe Staley, a guy who was a converted tight end, so maybe not like the strongest of guys coming into the NFL, but like moves well and could do things in space, drafted, on a later part of the 1st round.
You have to squint. You got to squint pretty hard, I think, for Joe Staley to pop up in my mind. My comp for him was not Joe Staley. My comp for him was Ezra Cleveland. And I don't know if you remember Ezra Cleveland coming out of college, but very
went to the Browns?
Yes, yeah. Very similar athletic profile, 2nd round pick by the Browns, I believe. And, sort of a lighter guy, just over 300 pounds, had nice workouts, kind of right on the cusp of size that you'd want at an offensive tackle, and ended up playing guard. And he's actually, made some money for himself as a left guard in the NFL. And I think he's played both guard spots at different locations. But that was more of my comp. I have some questions about him staying on the outside. Actually, he was interesting to me, because you would see the athleticism at times, and then other times you talked about him getting beat with speed. And then it was like, so are you faster or are you not? So I think maybe his athleticism is a little bit more linear, a little bit better getting out to the 2nd level than it is sort of in pass pro, which to me tells me maybe he might be a better guard and, a pulling guard style of player than more of a bookend offensive tackle in the NFL. I thought he played with, some scrappiness. So I was expecting, a light-footed finesse pass blocker, but what I saw was a guy who could run pretty well, but got beat too often in pass pro and was actually a better run blocker than I thought, and was a little bit scrappy and would get after it in the run game. And at times he looked well schooled, and at times he would be in perfect position and then still get beat, which I did not like. I did hear an interview with Roger Rosengarten, Croc. He was talking with, I think it was Brandon Thorne, who's like, offensive line guru guy. And he was talking about one of the things he does that is a rarity for college players. And I don't remember what he called the technique. It was like 44 technique or something like that. They called it at Washington. And essentially, and is what you were talking about with like the wide 9. And what he would do is use his athleticism to jump out and get to get to a defensive lineman and block him where he was, away from the quarterback more than to wait for him to get to him, if that makes sense. And there were some other terms they named for that technique. And and I am not an offensive line guru. And I think that works if you can get there. But if you don't get there, then now there's just more space for the pass rusher to go. And so I don't know if that's something he's going to continue in the NFL, something that you shouldn't be trying in the NFL. So I honestly, I didn't like him at all. Late 2nd round, I'm fine with. 1st round, there were just not quite enough there. You talked about how he got wrecked, especially at the inside, guys crossing his face, especially you saw that against Michigan, saw it against Texas a little bit too. And really just he lost too many blocks after the initial win. His arm length is 33.5, which is not terrible. It's right around, bottom of the threshold of what you want.
You want minimum, for the most part, 34 inches.
You want 34, and he's 33.5. So he's kind of right there, which is why I'm not seeing a slam dunk tackle. And if I'm not seeing a slam dunk tackle, am I seeing a difference-making interior offensive lineman potentially? In which case, I would probably put him behind the other guys that I like better as converted interior offensive linemen too. Like the Jordan Morgans and the Graham Bartons and the I don't know, Jackson Powers Johnson if he's there. I'd just rather get a stud center and know he's a good interior guy than have end up with a tweener. He gave me tweener vibes, not versatile tweener where he might not fit it either. Great, rather than being like, oh, he could do both really well, like I thought about Faltanu on the other side.
And I'm glad that you brought up kind of the scrappiness. I saw that as well. And that was something I wasn't expecting to see because he does look like he's built like a taller, linear guy. But I thought the way he wanted to finish blocks a lot of times, he kind of get in there and get a little nasty. That was something that showed up. I felt like plenty of times, no matter who I watched, whether it was, Boise State, Texas, whether it was Michigan, you'd see the reps where he was really trying to get physical and overly aggressive, which I like at the finishing point.
So in the end, I think, some folks like him at late one, potentially. I did not. I thought he was an early third, maybe. So what is that? Split the difference, and he's a mid-second round guy, maybe. And we'll see where he ends up on our big board, Croc, when we hammer that thing out on the new OT with BP YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe there because we're going to be going live during the draft on my new channel, Overtime with Brian Peacock. Good using that channel for some extra stuff that don't quite fit here on Locked On 49ers or the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. And of course, we're going to be doing some live second round as well with Croc's YouTube channel. And of course, hitting all the draft picks here on Locked On 49ers as well. So interesting player, Roger Rosengarten. I'm kind of out on him in the first round, but I don't hate him as a prospect. Interesting player. I'm just not sure if he's a tackle or guard in the NFL. And I think we'll probably find out soon if he is a 49er, which way that goes, like a much better on day 2 than day 1. Next, Andru Philllips, cornerback out of Kentucky, who showed up in Kiper's mock to the 49ers. Position of need, I think, for the Niners. And then JC Latham, offensive tackle from Bama next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is the place to bet on every single game. And I know there's no football games to bet on. Well, actually, there is some minor league football right now to bet on, but there's also NFL draft props, and you can find tons of draft props right now on first position or first player taken, second player taken, third player taken, what position the San Francisco 49ers will select in the first round of the draft. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So the second round pick in Kiper's mock draft was Andru Philllips, a cornerback from Kentucky. And interesting player who's I've heard a lot more of his name in the last 2 weeks, and not a lot of people were talking about him earlier on in the process, Croc. But you put on the tape, and immediately you can see an athletic cornerback. You are the cornerback guru, so I'm gonna let you go first again. What did you see when you watched Andru Philllips of Kentucky?
I think I saw someone that seemed like he was not a cornerback. Seems like he's somebody that's more of a nickel. So that's slot defender. And, just watching them first day, I'm like, it's a little bit on the smaller side of things. Just, height, weight, doesn't look like this physically imposing cornerback on the outside, which is where he lined up most of the time. But as you continue to watch his film, you start to see him play in the nickel. And I'm like, okay, there we go. I was watching him in the nickel. And I actually paid not more attention to him at nickel than outside because there's certain things you want to identify even with him being an outside cornerback, but just more in the sense of this is probably what you'll be playing at the next level. So what does that look like? I thought he had really good feet. I thought he was sudden. I'm not as sure about his short area explosiveness. When you're in the slot, guys already have space. The space is created. He has good feet, and then boom, let's say they run a China route right now. And, I got to get on that. How quickly does he? It takes a little time for him to kind of build up that type of initial speed. Now, long speed, I thought he showed well. All right, you watched the Florida game, and they took several shots at him vertically down the field. One was a post to Ricky Pearsall. Shout out to Slick Rick. A lot of people like him at receiver from Florida. And he did a really good job breaking up a ball at the catch point, maybe 55, 60 plus yards downfield. Really like to see that. But then they also tried him a little bit later down the right sideline on a straight go route. And he was there. He was in position. Receiver was able to high point the ball over him. So you saw that and what it looked like with him on contested catches. So I thought overall, from a skill set ability, you see things that you are intrigued by. Good fluidity, good feet, good long speed. Tackling, is that something that is going to be a forte of his? And I watched him in space, like just completely whiff on a screen. Like you can't have that at the next level. And you definitely can't have that trying to play for Kyle Shanahan because that'll automatically get you in the doghouse.
Sam Womack.
Oh, Sam Womack. I mean, you go back a couple years, Sam Womack, people forget this. Samuel Womack started for the 49ers in the nickel. Diamador Lenore did not start. Mm-hmm. Then all of a sudden, we see Lenore in there, and it's like, wait, where's Womack? And we didn't even know he did anything bad. But he's just like, never played again. Unless a bunch of guys are hurt.
You still hardly seen him.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Unless guys are hurt, you may see him here and there, like a play or so. And this guy had a really strong rookie preseason, and Kyle got him out of there quick. And I asked someone, shout out to Richard Sherman. Richard Sherman said, I think it's his run fits. Like that's what I'm hearing, like some run fit stuff. So you kind of see that on Phillips' film. Is he going to be a guy that tackles in space? That's maybe a question mark. And if you can't do that, you can't play nickel. Now, you might still be able to play on the outside, but then it kind of maybe limits some of the different schemes that you might get into. Definitely won't be in like a cover two scheme. Maybe not a quarters because you have to come down sometimes on, quick outs and things like that, come down and tackle. We'll see. But overall, I saw a guy that had, I feel like a pretty solid skill set of a guy who can run vertical, versatility, playing outside, inside, twitchy, sudden, change of directions there. And I'm intrigued and I want to continue to watch more of him.
Size would lead you to believe he is a nickel, Croc. He's he at the combine, he came in at 5'10" and 3/4, 5'10" and what 5'8", something like that. 190 pounds, small hands, really small hands. Arm length's fine, 31 and 1/4. 4.48 in the 40-yard dash, 1.51, which was nice for the quicks. 42-inch vertical, 11.3 broad jump, which, if I'm not mistaken, were tops for any defensive back. I believe both of those numbers. 11.1, 11.3. Yeah. So, and I don't know if you saw him. I'm pretty sure Andru Philllips is what he's known as. Drew sometimes, not Andrew. I'm pretty sure there's a viral video of, I don't know if it was at the Kentucky Pro Day, but it was somebody jumping through the roof, and I'm pretty sure it was Andru Philllips, like 45-inch vertical or something crazy, and everyone's going nuts. But he can leap, and he's got some athleticism and some explosive ability to him.
I would like to see that show up a little bit more on those short routes, like a China route.
Right. So that was one of my questions I was going to ask you, because there are times where he would seem like he would be in position to break on the ball, and he would just be a bit shy of making the play. And is it a length thing? Because like you kind of saw it in the run game, and sometimes short arms make you a bad tackler and make you not able to get your hands on footballs as a DB. There was just something weird, something missing with Andru Philllips. And if you're going to be, and I was kind of looking at him more as an outside corner, if you're going to be a nickel and you're not going to tackle well, are you a second-round guy? And I would think probably not. But one thing that happened I want to talk about really quick in Kiper's mock, and it's something that happened. I went live on the OT with BP channel and doing a little seven-round San Francisco 49ers mock draft. The thing that happened in that mock and the thing that happened on Kiper's mock is DBs went off the board. Corners went off the board. There was not much left at the end of the second round, and really nothing there in the third round that you'd want for the 49ers. So that is interesting. And Max Melton, Sandra Still, Rakestraw, all these guys, TJ Tampa, they're all off the board by the time the 49ers picked in Kiper's mock. And that makes me want to take a corner in the first round when I'm seeing all these guys go, because I'd rather take Kool-Aid in 1 than Andru Philllips in round 2. I think.
Gotcha. Now, would you like to have Kool-Aid in 1, but I don't know, some just edge rusher or offensive tackle that you just don't like at all in the second?
Here's the thing: is I would like Kool-Aid in 1, Rosengarten in 2, but I don't know if Rosengarten's going to be there in 2, because I would definitely not be super pumped on Rosengarten 1, Andru Philllips in 2, as Kiper had it in his mock draft. One thing that did happen in the mock draft I did, and using a mock draft simulator, you don't know how accurate it's going to be. And to be honest with you, the second round, I have no idea. There's a lot of prospects that are really close, I think. And in fact, I think if you took Kiper's mock draft, you took from the 49ers pick 31 or even a couple picks before, and you went all the way down to pick 64, where the Chiefs picked, the last pick of the second round, and you just reversed it completely, and you went 64 through 31, and that was his mock draft order, I don't think you'd bat an eye on it. Like, I don't know the difference between 31 and 64 right now. I think it's pretty close, which is a good and bad thing, right? It just is a matter of which positions you want. And when I did my mock draft on OT with BP, I got Johnny Newton because he was the best player, I thought, at 31. But there were some good tackles, defensive tackles, still there in the second round. Whereas the corners, I didn't like as much. And the offensive linemen, I didn't like as much. So if you're playing that game, maybe D tackle in the second round is a better position. Maybe corner's the last spot. Maybe get up a couple places to get your corner in round 2 if you're playing the draft game of where the strengths and weaknesses are in this draft. I'm starting to think that way right now.
Corner round 1, receiver round 2, because it's a deeper receiver class.
And then you get nobody on the offensive or defensive lines.
The 49er fan base will be at, what is it called, 149er way? What is that? They'd be there with their tiki torches.
49 DeBartolo way is what.
Yeah, there we go. I think I'm thinking the Jets is like one jet way.
Yeah,
but 49ers would be at that DeBartolo way with their tiki torches, and they try to set that thing on fire if you do not address the offensive line.
It'd be DEFCON 5. No, DEFCON. I always forget which way it goes. Which ways? I think DEFCON 1 is at. I always thought of it as DEFCON 5 as being the worst, but I think DEFCON 5 is actually the lowest level of warning. DEFCON 1 is like World War III. It'd be DEFCON like 2 or 3 probably if the 49ers did that. But it's a possibility. It's a possibility. We'll see. J.C. Latham, is he a future 49er? Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive and on the road and thriving. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, like superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home that W. Keep your car on the road and alive and thriving at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. So let's say the 49ers want a little size on the offensive line. Let's say they want the guy with the thickest ankles in the NFL draft, Croc. They might be looking at J.C. Latham. This is a large human being we're talking about here, Croc, out of the University of Alabama. And he fits right in with the Tyler Guytons and the Amarius Mims of the world, where he's a player that doesn't have a ton of experience, but, came from a big-time program that spits out big-time offensive linemen. So there's a reason, maybe he didn't play super early in his career. But he's got more playing time than both of those guys do at the University of Alabama, Croc. And J.C. Latham is huge. I mentioned his weight. He's 340 pounds, but he's much wider than the 6'8" Amarius Mims, who's also 340 pounds. J.C. Latham's a 6'5" and 5'8", 342 pounds at the combine, huge 11-inch hands, 35-inch arms. So he's got all of the size you want. And he's probably got the best anchor in the draft, Croc. You hit him and that's the end. He doesn't go backward. My question with JC Latham is he's a good player. He's a right tackle. He says he can play left tackle. He didn't work out at the combine. And guess what? He didn't do at his pro day. He didn't time at all, Croc. He's a decent athlete for how square he is. He's, just under 6'6", 342 pounds, Croc. But he's got nice feet for that size. My question is he a fit for Kyle Shanahan? And could you envision someone that even plays left tackle in the NFL as he says he could? And why didn't you work out if you might have run okay times? I think he might have run really terrible times. Now, look, it's all about the tape first, but you have to question if he's athletically what Kyle Shanahan might be looking for, even if they're even trying to go more towards gap stuff and more size than they have in the past with just pure athletic offensive linemen.
I'm coming up with my own scouting terms when I'm talking about offensive linemen. I called him a 3x3 mover. Do you have any guess of what that is?
Is that an In-N-Out burger?
It is not an In-N-Out burger, even though the triple decker 3x3 it is really good. But 3x3 mover, he can move 3 feet this way. He can move 3 feet this way. He can move 3 feet that way and that way. I don't know if I want him moving much more than that.
I like it.
So he's very strong. You see that right away. I talked about or I put in my notes, wants to win by overpowering defender. So there are some guys, we'll even say Rosengarten. You watch him get into his kick step and, it's just a little bit more finesse with the way he goes about getting a position to block. When you watch JC Latham, it's like more like basketball, right? If you could think of a wing defender and he's just kind of getting in position to make sure that this guy just can't blow by him, where it's not this technically sound perfection type kick step drop, but it's just like, I'm just going to get in position and then you're going to have to try to run through me. And guys just couldn't run through him. So I didn't think he moved necessarily well, but I thought he was a guy that when it came to powering or trying to overpower him, you just weren't going to do it. And even when he went to block a guy, because you'd see guys kick step and you see the good hands and everything. I didn't even see the good hands with him. It was just get in position, kind of wrap his arms around you a little bit and just hope you don't go by him, which more times than not, nobody did. So it was interesting because it wasn't pretty. Like I didn't watch this, like we watched Trent Williams. Yeah. And he might be a bad person to mention because there's only one Trent Williams. But it's so beautiful with how he goes about everything. Just his kick step, getting in position to pass block, to run block. It looks like poetry. And I would assume that a lot of people, maybe they use some of his footage to show some kids like, man, look how this guy, look at this pass set. Then when he wants to get nasty, look how he gets nasty, right? Like he gives you a little bit of everything. Latham only gives you one thing, and it is trying to overpower guys. But I don't know if he can move. And you talked about, does he fit Kyle Shanahan type scheme? From what I saw, I would say, I don't know if I see that. Mm-hmm. Now, we also said that Aaron Banks didn't quite fit. And then they worked with it, did their little magic until he did fit. And maybe you could do something like that with JC Latham. But he comes off as a guy that is a very big mover and not as fluid as some of the other guys we've seen play for Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, he's not a dancing bear. He's just a hungry bear. Yeah. And I think he'll be a fit for a lot of teams. And I've seen him go, speaking of, so I've seen him go as high as pick 5. And speaking of Jim Harbaugh and the type of offensive lineman he likes, and in fact, in Kiper's mock, they had Latham going 11 after they traded down with the Vikings from pick number 5. I mean, that's a perfect fit, right? And I could see Harbaugh drafting him at 11 and Kyle Shanahan not even drafting him at 31. But at 31, he'd probably be the best player available, but he might not be a great fit for the 49ers. So if you look at some guys that go in the same range as him, like Fuaga's kind of the same guy where it's like, okay, big, brutish right tackle. Fuaga's a great fit for the 49ers. Latham, maybe not as much. So I'm trading up for Fuaga. I'm not trying to trade up for Latham. And in fact, he's kind of one of those guys where it's like, you kind of hope he goes. I feel like Cooper DeJean's kind of this guy. I was like, good prospect, and you almost have to take him at 31, I hope he goes before the 49ers and it pushes somebody else down that I want to take more that I think fits better.
Yeah.
So if you were to rank these guys, Latham and Rosengarten, as far as tackles, both of them are after Fuaga, yeah?
Yes.
Both of them are after Faltanu from Washington?
Yes.
Both of them are after, let's start talking about like the guards that we've looked at, or, I mean, Graham Barton played tackle.
I like Rosengarten more than Barton, but where are we playing Barton, right? Like if we're talking about at right tackle, I like it, just Rosengarten looks like a tackle to me, where Barton looks like more of Daniel Brunskill, a guy who can play tackle, but you probably ideally like him more in the interior. In fact, that's probably a good comp for him. Like, you got a little bit of
Brunskill. That's a good one.
Yeah,
Brunskill is like a former tight end, athletic guy, not quite the size profile for an offensive tackle in the NFL, even though he's scrappy and played in there. So Graham Barton's immediately you're moving inside. Rosengarten, you're trying at tackle.
Yeah.
And that might be the difference for you. What about Suamataia?
I like him more.
More than both those guys.
That's the BYU tackle, right?
And then
I really liked him because I thought he moved well and he's huge.
Yeah. Then there was Guyton and Patrick Paul. And I think we both didn't love Guyton either for the 49ers.
I ain't like Paul as much.
I think you liked Paul more than Guyton, even maybe.
I did like Paul
both of them
more than
but neither. I think neither are great fits for the 49ers. And so you start to look at the guy. I mean, it's such a deep class, but then you start looking and you're like, okay, but then when you start looking who exactly fits for the 49ers, and then you start looking, okay, well, which guy's the tackle, which guy's the inside? And I think it starts to dwindle a little bit, especially early, which is why I think we both kind of land on Suamataia is like, okay, upside's there. Physically, he could be a tackle in the NFL. And I'm with you. I like Suamataia, who went, by the way, I talked about swapping. If you just flipped Kiper's mock, Suamataia went 64 to the last pick in the second round to the Chiefs. So if you just flipped 31 and 64 and went the opposite direction, you would have guys like Suamataia at 31, and you would have like, Melton in the early second round, and you would have Stanris still in the early second round.
I like Suamataia. Late second, huh?
Yeah. Consensus draft board has him around 37 to 40 range, I think. I'm hearing more and more people like him in the first round, but then Kiper kind of has Rosengarten, and at least in his mock draft had Rosengarten and Suamataia flipped from how I see it. So I don't know. It's really interesting. And again, it kind of just goes to show like it's going to be up to preference with people in that range of the draft, I think. All right, we're gonna have to stack the board. I think I think we see it similarly as far as how we might rank these offensive linemen. And I'm not going to fight you if you want to have Rosengarten ahead of like Guyton, but I'll fight you if you want to have Rosengarten ahead of Barton, I think. But that'll be fun. It'll be fun to hammer that out.
We might have to fight. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll scrap a little bit on some of these guys, but a lot of stuff we see very similar.
The fan base likes when we fight, when we disagree.
We don't disagree enough, and we don't fake disagree, which happens a lot in some cases, and we don't fake it either. So. But I mean, this is what's going to happen, right? When you're trying to hammer out a big board, nobody's going to agree on the exact order of 50 prospects.
Right.
There's going to be some variance there. So that's what we got to figure out. Just don't forget who the GM and who the assistant GM is. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody, for making this your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Croc and I back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.